I have,
Sorry.
Yvette, do you want to start us off? To begin by bringing us in?
I certainly can. Hello, everyone. Our small, intimate group. I love it. It's wonderful to see all these great faces. We welcome you to our budget hearing for the New York conference. And I am Yvette Wynn. I'm the treasurer. But tonight, the main event for our material tonight will come from David Losito. And maybe we'll open up in a quick prayer. Gracious and loving God, thank you for bringing these fine folks here tonight to discuss how you are moving through our midst, through our conference, and the work that you call us to do, and how this financial piece will be but a small part, but an important part that we need to work through tonight. Be with us as we review all of this information, and be on our tongues and on our hearts as we walk forward into this work. Thank you for keeping us in your care. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Yvette.
Thank you. Thank you, David. And I'm going to hand it officially over to you and be here as your wing woman as usual.
Okay, thank you. Well, welcome to everybody this evening. This is our second year of doing a virtual budget hearing. Not my favorite thing to do, because I'd rather have that close, intimate, being able to chat face to face and give you the opportunity to see each other and interact. But this is what we have for this year. Hopefully next year we will be back to a in-person viewing and discussion of the budget. Let me just go over quickly some of the ideas of this particular hearing is to allow you the opportunity to ask specific questions about the budget. Well, I'll go over the budget in kind of broad strokes, but more detailed, and allow you the opportunity, if you have questions, to ask those, and I will answer those as best I can. And then we will, when you're satisfied, we will end the meeting basically. So that's what we're here for. And as Ryan said earlier, we are videoing this, taping this video, so that you'll have an opportunity, or others will have an opportunity, to review it before the actual vote on Tuesday evening, when Yvette will be leading that time for us. So that being said, and I appreciate Yvette's prayer, because it is through the grace of God that we are here to do this. And let me give you just a brief overview of the process. So we get information from the staff and other sources, as far as the different staff or commissions. And after those sources are put together, we have a meeting with the Budget and Finance Committee, and we discuss in detail what we think the budget should look like. And then once that we do that, we approve that and send it to the conference board. The conference board had several weeks to review the budget, ask any questions, and make any changes. And then this budget comes from the conference board to the annual meeting. So it's their budget to proceed. Now I'm going to ask Ryan to put up the budget so that we can discuss that. And I see he's doing that. Great. So I want to go over the income area first. And so one thing I did differently this year than past years is I changed the wording on line 6. Before we used to say OCWM, our church's wider mission, and then RA assessment. But we for the last few years have been using this other term, LCBS, or local church basic support. That is our main source of funding, and that is the combination of our church's wider mission and the RA assessment. That is where we get most of our funding from. So the projection for line 7 is for 2022 is lower than what we expected in 2021. And that's primarily because of the fact of what we experienced in 2020. With the fact that we had the COVID pandemic, this is probably the toughest number that we have had to come up with, because we really don't know where the churches are at this point as far as their funding and being able to contribute to the conference. I mean, so far this year in 2021, I'm sorry, did somebody say something? No, okay. In 2021, we have been now through June a little ahead of last year, which was a difficult year, as everybody is aware. So we really, you know, as general budgets are estimates of what you think will come true. So this is really probably our most challenging year for trying to determine what our local church basic support will be. Our RA assessment is based on a number of members times the amount of funding that they will give. So that may be a little bit stronger to think that we have 90,000 RA assessment. We are running close to the 87,000 for this year, so in 2021. So that may actually be a stronger number. We're combining for $690,000 as our projected amount. That is definitely a decrease from what we projected in 2021. We finished the year at, I believe, about 720,000 well, actually less than that. We actually finished with 660,000 in 2020, but still project that we will make a bounce back in 2021. So it really is a difficult area for our funding for this year in 2022. Some of the other income numbers that we have are very similar to past years. I'm going to skip over line 11 because I'll get them back to that, which is our unrestricted investment transfer, because that's more of our, what we consider sort of our deficit or what we need to be funding internally. So in line 12 is per capita, and that is a $2 assessment that we use for the number of churches that we have. We are using the same number as we did in 2021. And as you can see in 2020, we didn't really do as well as we anticipated that we would do, but it was really because of the fact that we didn't have the participation of all the churches because of basically COVID. So we anticipate having a comeback in that area. Our direct conference support, our Friends of the Conference, the funding there is similar to 2021 that we're projecting, but it's a little lower. We actually did, the preliminary actual was for column G that goes down. That was like a month before that we actually closed. So we actually finished closer to $20,000 in our Friends of the Conference in 2020. So we anticipate that's basically individuals, sometimes churches, but a lot of times individuals that support the conference outside of our main funding. Other income sources. Let me go down to line 18, the annual meeting. If you go over to column G, you'll see we had $50 for our annual meeting as far as our income. Oh, thank you, Ruth, for that question. I'll come back right now to that. Is our per capita in 2019 was over $40,000. I think it was about 45. And that was our first year of funding for per capita. If you remember, we used to have the covenant share that really had the struggle of coming up with the funding that we needed as additional support. So back to line 18, the annual meeting is that because of the fact that we really did not do an annual meeting last year, we had the conference board that really did the service of being the annual meeting. We had very little income. We anticipate in 2022 to have a full annual meeting back to normal. Excuse me. And so we're anticipating that we will get back to our normal income levels. That would be basically for the fees that we charge to support the annual meeting. So the entrance fee to come in, and also any kind of other income that is support, like if we have displays or some other things that donations that we get from the annual meeting to support that. And I'll talk a little more about the other side of that as well in a little while. The legal fee assistance from churches, we anticipate that being a little more back to normal and requesting the support of the churches for the legal services that we are providing through Heather Kimmel's office. And that will, that funding has been very successful, that many of the churches have supported that legal assistance, because it really is very invaluable to our, I mean, it's a huge benefit for our churches. Online giving campaigns, that is generally been our New and Right Spirit. And that we anticipate in previous years, we've done an Ash Wednesday or an All Saints different funding. So $6,000 is not out of the ordinary for us to raise at that time, but that is more restricted. That would go towards the actual expense that we're trying to get funding for. Correct. David made a comment, David Gajewski. We did not ask for support for the legal fee assistance for churches in 2020 because of COVID. So that's why you see only $300 that was received in 2020. So line 21, it says rental or other income. That is more the other income. At one point, we anticipated the possibility of renting the Amistad Center. And that was where the 2021 budget number of $15,000 was anticipated. But as you probably know, we have chosen to sell the building, and we are in the process of selling that. We have a accepted offer. We're trying to remove the contingencies and hope to have that done sometime in the fall, so that we will have that closing. So that would be other income that we receive that would be outside of the rental income that we were anticipating. To the next area is the congregational development, and the funding that you see there, line 23, 24, and 25, have to do with that one area. Line 23 continues to help fund any of our programs as far as church revitalization, any of the program strategies for church development that we might run. And that's coming from our funding that we have of in the past closed churches that we have been able to sell. We have about, I think about $70,000 to $75,000 remaining in that fund. So we don't really, if we use a lot of that in 2022, we would be really getting low on that funding. But as been the case, well, in 2020, we really didn't spend much money. As you see, $20,000 was all we used in 2020. And at this point in 2021, we have spent, we've allocated zero from that fund. So we still have a good amount of funding available. And so we hope to be able to have that fund to continue. So Gary Gossel asked, what sources will provide $15,000? We have a couple different ideas, but one of those that I anticipate, we have some funds that we have allocated, set aside for different things like unemployment insurance. So some may know this and some may not, is that churches have the opportunity to now be part of the unemployment coverage of New York State. So what they can do is they can opt to, instead of having a rate for their unemployment insurance, they can be on direct reimbursement. So what that means is that we fund our own unemployment, and we have never had to tap into that fund. So if if we need to, we can take that source of income. There are other opportunities. Sometimes we will receive some trust benefits, different bequests and things like that happen. So that would be just to have some additional funding that we anticipate. We usually have had some things over the years that have allowed us to do that. Okay, so continuing on congregational development is that we have set aside from our budget, we have received for different programs, that would be $6,000 of fees that we would charge for different programs, and also the offering of the Strengthen the Church that we have been receiving less money over the years, so that's why we've lowered that by $2,000 in 2022. Leadership development is that you notice that we in 2020 we only had $300 that we received. That's because basically with COVID we had zero programming that we could do as far as face-to-face. The consultation we weren't able to do. We weren't able to do many of the other programs, and now even in 2021, many of our programs will not be face-to-face, they will be remote. So a lot of that income stream has been lower. We anticipate in 2022 to be back to a little more normal time where we will have the consultation and other different events for Commission on Ministry. The program support line number 28 is the Brown grant funding that we've received in the past. We have been very fortunate to receive the Brown funding, and I know that every time that we've received it, they are impressed with the programs that we provide to the conference. So that's been very fortunate for us. The communities of practice, the $4,000 is for the fees that we charge the individual to be part of that process. And that has been, appears to be very successful, continues to be successful, that Marsh is leading. NISM grant income, that is the Carpenter grant that we have been very fortunate to receive over the years. $20,000, as you see, every year we've been able to get that through the fine request from Marjorie Pernine that she does every 2 years, and I provide some financial assistance for giving her some numbers for that. The retreat and program, line 31, and the tuition and classes come directly from the committee for NISM that determines what they anticipate the fees will be, the receipts for those programs. And then line 33, the youth ministry, we anticipate, I'm probably looking to Ryan, but we anticipate in 2022 we'll have face-to-face meetings and maybe a little more normal as far as the, we were actually able to do the 2020 youth meeting, state youth event before we got shut down. So that at least we had something that year. It was, I think, smaller, but we hope to be back to a little more normal in 2022. And the last area is the wider church ministries. Primarily the New York Help, which sustains itself. The New York Help receives donations, and then they have their own budget that they disperse, and it basically funds itself. We really are more of a assistance of Conduit, and they do a great job in Honduras with that ministry. So now I'd like to see if there have any questions on the operating income that we've gone through. Anything on that? The only thing I haven't gone over is the unrestricted investment transfer line 11, but we'll get back to that in just a little while. And as you can see, we've gone down just slightly in our anticipated income, 0.4%.
Can you just explain what the Friends of the Conference and the Direct Conference, what
Support
that
is?
Yeah,
Sure.
what exactly that money is and where does it come from exactly?
Okay. Those two lines, Friends has been, Direct Conference support has been around for a long time. And the Friends of the Conference has been ever since David came and had that specific campaign that we have utilized over since 2012, 2013, somewhere around there when David came. The whole idea with that is that it's more of an individual. In the past, we used to send out around Thanksgiving letters and also envelopes to ask people to support the conference individually instead of by churches. And it's more of a building up that donor base of development that we try to utilize. On the other hand, the conference direct support is basically someone that someone or something that doesn't, like a institution that is not aware of Friends or anything like that, but just wants to support the conference and is not through the normal funding. So it's kind of like an other area. I hope that that helped. Does that help you as far as the question?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, so we'll go on to the expenses. So thank you, Ryan. So the next big area, of course, is our personnel area. And I want to point out line 50 first, because I want to show that if you look at column K, you'll see that our increase is 1.4%. In looking at what's going on especially in our world today, as far as in the United States, that we're really in a crunch as far as keeping our costs down. Many employers are struggling with their trying to keep their labor costs down. We're anticipating only a 1.4% increase overall. That includes all the benefits as well. We only have a 1% increase in our staffing salaries and salaries and housing for those that qualify for housing. And our benefits continue to, it's a challenge with benefits, but also we do provide a good benefit package through the pension board, but it does cost some money. But I do think it's really impressive if you look at those 4 year, well, it'd be actually 3 years, that the costs have really not gone up very much over those 3 years. So I think that's really something to be proud of and happy that we were able to do that. And they are our best representatives, the staff is of the conference. I know during COVID, it was very challenging for us, but I do feel that the staff's stepped up to try to provide as many services as possible. So I do applaud the ministry team and what they've done to assist. Any questions on the personnel costs? Because I know that's a big area. Is there anything that anybody had a question on? Okay, well, if you do, feel free to ask later.
I have
Ruth has a question.
Yes,
Yeah.
Ruth?
How many full-time people do we have as, what's the,
Conference ministry team.
yeah,
Let's see. Three full-time. No, 4 full-time and 2 part-time. Is that right, David? 4 and 2? I think that's correct.
How does that compare with other conferences? Similar size. How many congregations do we have?
I think it's, the latest numbers are around 235 or 240, somewhere around there. We have a good sized staff, but I think, there are some like Southern New England that have bigger staffs. But we have a lot of area to cover too. And I think the nice, the great thing with our staff is they have 2 hats they really wear. They have a bit of a regional hat, but primarily they have a ministry hat of what their specialty is, like what is it that is their ministry expertise or whatever they're called to. We have leadership development, church revitalization, communications, and online community like Brian, search and call that Gary does. Each of them has their own area that they're assisting with. So that I think that's a good model, is to have those 2 things.
And I would just say that maybe in my mind, we're not large, but not small. In the sense that there are some conferences with only 1 staff person. There's just a conference minister. Their budgets are very small. We have more staff, but it's a real challenge sort of balancing it all. To David's point, there are some conferences that do have larger endowments and bigger staff. So, I would say, I don't know, David Gajewski, we're probably somewhere in the middle.
We are, I believe we are the 7th largest conference in terms of the number of churches. And I believe that in terms of the number of members, we're more like around the 13th out of 36.
Yeah. So
Do we have 5 FTE? We've got 4 and 2. Does that come up to 5 FTE, or is it less than 5?
I would say it's a little more, because I
It's more
think
than-
Marjorie is 2/3
More than 5.
and you're
More than
3/5.
5.
Yeah.
So it's
It's probably 5.2, probably,
okay.
something like that. And then, as David mentioned, we have 3 part-time staff people that are administrative. And that includes me. That is, well, actually, the administrative staff includes just Lisa and Suli. The conference ministry team does include me, but I'm part-time as well. So that would be that I'm 3/5 the time. So that's actually, it would be closer to 6 FTEs.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. If we go on to the next area, the financial management and oversight. So the big change here, of course, is that the selling of Amistad Center. So just to, if you don't know what the plan is that we do have an offer that was full price, which we really didn't anticipate receiving. The full price, we really thought we would probably get less than that. The funds from the sale plus the remaining funds from the building maintenance fund that we had that are around $225,000 right now will be put together for a fund that we will be able to utilize to help support our budget in the future. We'll let it grow according to the conference board's guidelines a couple years, and then it will be probably like a 5% draw each year to assist us. So that will be a good assistance to our budget for our operations. You'll notice that the staff offices and the staff travel both are remaining the same. Right. David did point out to everybody, the Amistad Fund will be an endowment. We will not utilize the principal, correct? It'll be just the 5% of the average of the income for those years.
The Amistad Fund being what?
It's those two funding streams. It would be the proceeds from the sale of the Amistad Center, plus the remaining funds from the Building Maintenance Fund.
Okay.
The staff offices, what that entails is that we are all now with this virtual. And so all of us are working out of our homes, and as right now I am working out of my home. And even though my background says I'm somewhere else, I'm really not. So the thing is that we, to provide those staff offices, we needed to help to set those up, and there's costs involved with the technology, and to make sure that we would be effective in our ministry that what we're doing. So that's where the cost of the $59,900 is about. And as we move along, I think that will become even more, I want to say streamlined. It'll be easier for us to continue to do this. I think it gets better each month that we're doing this. We do a staff check-in every week, and every 4 to 6 weeks we do a staff meeting. So we're used to doing this virtual, and there will be times now with COVID kind of lowering that we'll be able to get together in different places as a staff face to face, which is our hope. You'll notice the line 56 that in 2020 our actual travel was pretty low, 41,000 compared to a budget of 95. And of course that was because of COVID, and we weren't, the staff was not allowed to travel to meet with people, only do virtual meetings. So there was some at the beginning of the year that was cost. And I can tell you for 2021, right now it's running lower, unless we are able to do meetings in the second half, which I'm anticipating we probably will be doing some face-to-face meetings. It may be very similar to what we saw this year. Yes, and we also have one of the things that when you do this, you anticipate that you're going to be utilizing, is that we have several cars that we have purchased over time. So we're paying on their loans, and those expenses, the depreciation on those cars, go towards the expense of the travel of those individuals that have cars. So normally that would be much lower than paying, the IRS rate for mileage. But in this case, we actually still have those costs. So there's nothing really we can do about that. So it probably would have been much lower if we were paying, just the standard IRS rate. But it would, in the long run, it's more cost effective to buy cars than it is to actually pay the IRS rate. So,
David,
yes.
I'm not clear why, if everybody was working out of their homes
Mm-hmm.
in 2020 and the expense was 20,268, I'm not clear why it's budgeted at 59,900.
Okay. Well, Ruth, if you look higher up, you'll see the 67,000 on line 53.
Yes.
Because we were in transition for 2020. We weren't there yet. We only started really being having full virtual office. So some of that $59,900 was in line 53 in 2020. Okay, do you see what I mean? So all those costs, like any kind of, we have to do different kinds of technology services, like even Zoom, for example, is part of that. Any other things that we do for technology would be in there. And then in 2021 and 22, we do pay some amount to the staff to have the office in their home because they have to provide internet and different kinds of things for that. So, just to cover slightly the cost. It really doesn't cover the cost, but slightly it does. Does that make sense, Ruth?
Is that typically what other businesses are doing?
I think you'll find that there's a lot of businesses that are thinking about virtual much more than they did before COVID.
No, I mean, in terms of anybody I've talked to, it's been interesting to me. Anybody I've talked to has not gotten any money from their employer for working at home. They'll get the laptop and that, but they're not getting paid. They're not, their room or whatever space is not, there's no rent coming to them, so to speak.
We're not talking a lot of money. It's like $100, $150 a month. It's not like a lot. So it's only scratching the surface. It's not like we're providing an office where we're saying, okay, let's see, 1/6 of your real estate taxes, and then it's nothing that big. It's just a small assistance to the staff member. So
I'm kind of in agreement with Ruth. I was questioning that number as well. So I think a lot of people would question that number, especially how it stays the same at 59.9 year over year. So is it possible to get a more detailed report published to say everything that's going into that 59.9 and why it would stay the same every year at that? Because it does seem high.
for the staff offices.
Yeah.
Well, sure. There definitely is a possibility of trying to give you a more detailed list of those expenses. I think the thing is that we are going from, if you take 53 and 55 together, we're going from almost 90,000 to 60. So we're saving $30,000 a year by not having the building. Plus, we're getting the proceeds of the asset sale. So I do think that as I mentioned too, I think that we could be looking at lower costs as we move forward. But if there's some way a vehicle, I can give you a more detailed list of some of the.
I guess is the question more about what the policy is around the staff expenses, home offices?
My question is, what went into that 59.9? How'd you come up with 59.9?
See if I can.
Okay, we can certainly get back to you with that.
Right, I'm having a hard time getting to my files. So
Well,
No problem, we can dig into that.
if,
right, and actually maybe respond to it at the overall
At the-
meeting.
Yes, when I present, I can definitely get back. But if we have the answer, David, you and I can talk tomorrow and we can definitely email this group back. This is a small enough group.
Mm-hmm. Okay, sure.
well, I guess, you said it was 100 to 150 per person. So that's 1,200 to 1,800 per person for just the rent of the space, right?
Mhm. Right,
So how many people are working from, that could be half the cost right there.
right. That's true.
Right, but let's, David, let's just give a thorough answer instead
Okay.
of piecing it together tonight, and have you go through everything that's in the report, and then we can come back with the answers to any questions.
Okay, that sounds good. The rest of the expenses under financial management and oversight, discretionary funds are a small fund that the conference minister can administer at his discretion, similar to like a pastor has some discretionary funds. For assistance, annual audit, that's just a small increase from 2020. We did spend $12,500 on the audit, so that's how much it costs. Our conference property and liability insurance will go down once we have the building gone. So you'll see that it's was a little higher in 2020 because of some of the costs with the building, but once we will be done with that, we will have lower costs for the property insurance because that will be gone. Legal services, that is the cost for Heather, and if we had other legal services, fortunately, we haven't had to do that. And miscellaneous expenses, we fortunately have not had many needs for those expenses, but sometimes things do arise that we need to pay for. So overall, we only had an increase of 1.1% from our budget for 2021. Any further questions on any of those? And then under governance, our annual meeting, there's where the funding that I mentioned about the $30,000 that we had for our annual meeting income. Our goal every time that we have our annual meeting is generally just to break even. We try to set it so that the entrance fees that we charge will hopefully cover the costs for the annual meeting or close to it. And we try to pick venues that will be cost effective and available to our members as much as possible too. The conference board, we actually didn't spend any money basically in 2020 because of the fact that we didn't have any face-to-face meetings. A large portion of this is to fund the conference board being at the annual meeting, and since we didn't have an annual meeting, and many times if we do have a face-to-face, there are members of the board that don't ask for reimbursement of their expenses anyways. So it's really a modest fund for the 4 meetings that we usually have. We have at least one that's virtual anyways during the year. So our administrative costs are 1.3% higher than last year, so very modest increase of that amount. Congregational development, very similar to past years. We, as some of you may know or have experienced, we used to have another line item for national support of new church starts, but we no longer, if national does support new church starts, the funding does not come through us anymore, and that's been for several years now. So these are, line 73 is for those that the congregational vitality area, basically Chanel and David, choose as a new church start that we'd like to fund. And so we really, we had one last year for part of the year. And at this point, we do not have anybody that's, as far as I know, on the radar in 2021 at this point. But we do set that money aside if we are going to ever, if we are able to utilize it. So we're always trying to find good candidates for that. Line 74 is any of the program area that we have that we try to assist congregations in developing or revitalization. Again, with COVID, it was hard to have many programs. So that was a really low year. But our funding to have these programs, we set aside the $20,000 that's the amount of funding that we take from the funds in normal years. Any questions with that? Leadership development. As I mentioned earlier, when we were talking about the funding of the Commission on Ministry, The leadership development program area basically funds the consultation, boundary awareness, different other programs that we have in the leadership development area. Communities of practice is part of that area, which is line 79, but is not in the overall leadership development line item. But that has been successful, that Marcia has been leading. Also in that area is New York School of Ministry, which has been very successful. And we continue to train many lay people with the track towards ordination at times, but also just to train people with different programs. And it's been, like I said, very successful. And those numbers that are shown there as far as expenses come directly from that committee. Youth empowerment. I know that Ryan is looking at different areas as possibilities for beyond the state youth event, but I don't know what that would be. But those are the funds that we set aside each year to, but primarily they're the fees that we charge for the events, but also some funding from our conference. Laity programs and the continuing education consultants. Line 86 is primarily the funding that we receive, that we fund the programs of the Practical Resource Center down in Long Island, Charlene's organization, which allows all the conference members to be able to access programs for free during the year. So that is the cost of the funding for that, including the New York State Sexual Harassment Prevention Training. So that really is a huge benefit to us, not only all the other programs that I personally have even taken advantage of, which they're really fine programs. So that's our leadership development area. The wider church ministry, we have in this area the conference dues and national shared expenses. Those expenses are for those that, as a New York conference, we share with other conferences and together fund different things for that we jointly share. As you can see, it's very small. The other thing that we share is Heather Kimmel. So those are the two areas that we share expenses for. And then the national basic support is basically 10% of our funding from our LCBS, so which is the local church basic support. Okay. Any questions on that so far? Ryan, if you want to go down one more sheet. There we go. Continuing the wider church area. As I mentioned about the New York Help Honduras, they do a tremendous job of supporting that ministry in Honduras, and they manage their own budget. We just basically support them by receiving the money and then dispersing the expenses for the ministry. The Global Church Ministry is administered by the Global Commission. A few years back, we asked the Global Commission as well as the Ecumenical Interfaith Ministry to lower and disaster ministries to lower their budget by 25% to try to accommodate the fact that we have less resources, and they've continued to maintain those funding decreases. So they, of course, in 2020, you'll see that there was very little expense in any of those areas. In the line 98, the Ecumenical and Interfaith Ministry, the main expense there is $4,000 that they support the New York State Council of Churches each year. So that's the main expense that didn't stop during the pandemic. But hopefully 2022, they're going to get back to more of a full-time area and be able to disperse those. And you'll notice line 96, we have set aside $5,000 in our budget for the General Synod. Every year, every off year of the General Synod, we used to set aside some money that we utilize to kind of cushion the overall cost of it being in 1 year. So we try to spread it out over 2 years, and that usually is the initial reservations, like the fees to for the hotels or the registrations to initially, and we usually pay those in the beginning, like in the previous year for the next year. I wanted to mention about line 99 and 100. So the Justice and Witness Ministry is the new and right is some of that is the new and right spirit, as well as line 100. And I think that this is in our life of our conference. I think it's a very important area in what we are doing with some of the programs that we have to make sure that they are we are acting justly as far as what we're doing. So I think that's a really big area. May not seem like a lot of money, but it's really well utilized, and it is. We have some carryover funds we continue to use as well from previous years that help fund that ministry, that I think is really very important and on the cutting edge for us. So total operating expenses, we actually are down slightly by 0.4% during the for this budget compared to 2021. Any questions that I can go over on the expenses that we haven't already asked, or clarifications? So our last area is our non-operating income and expense. So each year, we've been budgeting $15,000 of undesignated investment earnings and $7,500 of designated investment earnings. That gives us a total of $22,500. And I like to keep this outside of our normal operating area, because our investments, some years we'll have great years, and some years we'll have not so great years. And it really is hard to tell what that's going to be like. So we really budget a minimal amount of appreciation in that area, because we really don't want to be dependent on that in our budgeting, because it is very hard for us to anticipate. Now, 2020 turned out to be a very good year, as you can see by the numbers that we had at that time of $99,000 in appreciation. It was a bit of a surprise that we would receive so much. Well, first of all, that part of that was designated gifts that we did receive, but also there was probably more appreciation that's being shown on this this particular slide. We did very well, considering that in the middle of 2020 we were kind of in a bit of a panic, because as everybody else was experiencing, the investment community was in the tailspin, down 20%. We were not sure how things were going to go. So for us to have a positive year last year was pretty incredible. And it was likewise in 2019. So those last 2 years have been very successful. 2021 at this point is also been very successful. I think the last I checked, the market was up 17%, which does really help us a lot at this point. But like I said, we can't bank on that being a positive each year. So that's why we really minimize the amount that we project in that area. Any other questions on that? And I'll go back to the unrestricted investment transfer.
How much do we have? How much is there in endowment?
Well, in our unrestricted investments that we have over 650,000 right now.
And how about
What's that?
restricted? What's restricted?
The restricted varies depending on, some of that we don't really get much from, that we're just kind of holding for other reasons, for other people, organizations, I should say. The total overall right now is over $2 million that we have in the whole fund. That would include, as I mentioned earlier, the building maintenance funds, and different other restricted funds that we maintain, that we may not receive much of anything except for the fact that we do the administrative work for it. So we get some small fee. So overall, we really, what we're really looking at is that $650,000 that we have left over in our funding, that is our prime source of any deficits that we have. So
And last year we had a deficit of 19,000, so that came out of there. Is that the basic?
right. So, and actually it did turn, by the time we did, this was only preliminary. So we just finalized our audit. So that's not really accurate, because we just finished that just a short while ago. In fact, like a couple weeks ago. We actually had a positive, Ruth. So we actually turned positive for this year, primarily because we didn't spend a lot of money for the expenses that we had because of COVID, and our investments did well. So it was kind of a strange year, even though our funding was down, I think it was 8%, down 8%, something like that. So it was a different year.
For sure. Yeah, thanks.
Ryan, if you want to go back up to the first slide, yeah, the first page. Yeah, thank you. So I want to focus on line 11. So as I mentioned about the what happened in 2020, the great thing for us was that we only requested $20,000 from our investments. That's column G, line 11. So not only did we do well as far as the year, but we also did not take much money out of our investments, which was a definite blessing to us. In 2021, you notice that we have jumped up to $136,000 as our what we're projecting. Now, 2021 right now is still been somewhat similar to 2020 in that we have not spent a lot of program money. So right now we have not transferred any money from our investments because of that. We can thank the PPP loan grant that we've been able to receive. We did receive and were forgiven the first one of over $153,000 for 2020. And we have another one for 2021 of $125,000 that we are hopeful will be forgiven soon. Our portal opens up in a few weeks for that one.
How are you getting that when your income's only been down 8%?
Well, if you remember, the caveat with that is that there wasn't an income necessary for the first one. But there was
Right.
for the, because
I'm
we had
aware of that, yes.
too low. The second one was per quarter. So we were able to show in the second quarter that we were down over 20% in between 2019 and 2020. So we were down actually, I think it was 32% in our income sources. So that's how we were able to do that.
Okay.
It does seem that forgiveness is easier this time around even than previously. So, and actually, I think the latest I heard that the SBA was eliminating some of the even questioning the $2 million ones or something like that, that they no longer had to substantiate that they were down. So, so we were fortunate to get both of those. That was a big blessing for us that has helped our funding.
Sure.
So,
Okay, we had a question in the chat.
oh,
Metro and the PPP, if the numbers that you were just referenced included their portion.
what was the question, Yvette? I'm sorry.
It just said, do the numbers include the money that went to Metro? That you just referenced,
Yes.
like the 125,
Yeah,
that net Metro's payout?
it does not. It does not net Metro's payout, which is about, I think theirs for this year is 16. So it would be closer to like 110. So Metro is part of our payroll presently and was last year as well and previously. So we did give that money that was associated with their payroll to them. And so even though we did receive the 153, they actually received, I think it was about $20,000 in 2020. So we actually received about 133. And in 2021, I think it's about 16. So it's about 109 that we received. So
Where is that shown on here, the PPP loan?
actually, let's see. I don't know if I can see it from, let me just see if it's on mine here. That may not have gotten into the first draft of the assistance at this point. Yeah, I don't think it was in here when we did this original.
David, would that show up on a balance sheet of some sort?
Well, it would originally been, yes, that's true, is that, good point. Thanks, Gary. The thing was when we did the budget, we didn't have the forgiveness yet. So Ruth, it wouldn't have shown up on the income statement because of the fact, or the, our operations, because we hadn't gotten forgiveness at that point. So when the budget was done, we did not have that. So when we did get forgiveness, then we changed it with the audit. So, so that was like a subsequent event thing that happened.
Okay, but I'm confused as to, if I look at these numbers, this shows a negative 19,000,
Right.
but then you're talking about another 133,000 or something. Well, actually, I'm looking at 2020. Yeah. So did you get the forgiveness in 2020 or did you get the money in 2021?
We got the forgiveness in 2021.
Okay. So it
But-
doesn't really show on here yet.
Right. It would have been subsequently when we finished the audit that we did show it. But it wasn't when we went to press on this. So that's why it doesn't show up. So
Okay.
good point. Thank you.
Yeah, so I'm just looking at the time, it is 7:36 and we had, allocated an hour?
Correct.
You still haven't explained the 182.
Right. Yes, let me get to that before we close. So the reason for the continued increase is that that we anticipate in 2022 if everything goes the way that we have projected. As I mentioned before, budgets are an estimate We don't always know what's going to happen in the future. Particularly, I mean, 2020 was definitely one of those years. So why is it going up? I mean, we did come from years of, $250,000 amounts taken out of investments or more, and depending on, what was going on in particular years. The tension that we're experiencing right now is that we're a bit in flux because of two major events that are happening. First, as I mentioned, the Amistad Center. So that funding will be probably about $650,000 of the funds. And our conference board has requested that we hold on to that, let it grow a bit over a couple years, and then that will be helped to utilize for our budget. So even if we're looking at a 5% on like an easy, maybe $700,000, for example, that would be $35,000 a year. So, but that's in the future still. The other tension that we have going on, the other area of funding, is our capital campaign. And we're still a long way from getting to that $1 million mark that we're looking for. That anticipation is that in a few years, so it's probably more than what we're looking at for the Amistad Center, is that may be 3 or 4 years down the road. And if we did another 5% for that, that'd be another $50,000. So right now, our expenses are still a bit high on because of the fact we don't have that funding yet. Our hope is that line 7 will be higher than $600,000 because that is a low estimate for this year, for 2022. And the anticipation is that we will be back to a little more normality. But we have to be realistic and say that we want to make sure that we're trying to be good stewards and say that it may still be a year of trying to recover from some of the leftover remnants of COVID. So that funding may still be lower than we anticipate. So that's why right now we're anticipating 182. Our hope is that it won't be as high as that. But we are going to have a couple years, I think, here of struggle to keep that number low. And that's what we're working on to continue to make sure that we look at all our funding sources and make sure of our expenses. So does that help, Ruth, or whoever else has questions about that?
So if,
I think we just expect our expenses to be higher because things are gonna open up. And, that's kind of and we just don't know if we can offset it. But to David's point, we could have a year where expenses continue to be low, where we budget for that high number, but that's not where the actual is.
one of the questions that I have, David, is
Mhm.
on the notes page you sent that says under note number 2, unrestricted investment transferred to balance 2022 budget, we anticipate higher amount because of sale of building.
Right.
That to me is not clear.
Okay.
I didn't understand what that meant at all.
Yeah. Well, let me explain that. Was that one of the things that could have lowered that initially was if we rented the building. So if we rented the building, we would have had an income stream that would have supported our budgets, and but we wouldn't have the proceeds from the sale of the building. So that was the trade-off. What I think it's a positive of what we're doing, because I do think it's cost effective in the long run. I do think that we just have to wait a few years for that fund to build, and we will get probably, it's not going to be probably as big of an income stream as we might have gotten from the building, but I think it's more appropriate for us not to be in the rental business of owning this building and trying to rent it could be a for-profit or something like that. So,
And where are we at with the capital fund campaign? How much has come in?
It's really not begun. It's been in very soft launch due to COVID. So, we've had training, but it's been difficult to kind of go out to prospective donors in this period. But, we do expect over the next, 6 months to a year to be able to ramp that back up. So I think it's been about $100,000 that we've collected, and we had a target of $1 million, which would be our percentage. So we are, well under that because we haven't really been able to engage as of yet.
yeah.
I don't know, David Gajewski, if you have more to add. 200,000, excuse me.
But the
But
200,000 is for, so it's
For both, yeah.
100,000 for.
That's correct.
Yeah.
100,000 for each.
I think now that COVID is getting, less of a problem, it will be easier to ramp that up. But I think we're at least a year behind what we should have been, at least, because we would have, if COVID didn't happen, we would have been further along. So,
Yeah. So with the PPP loans, you said it was something like 130 some odd thousand and then another 120 or something. Is that what you said?
109.
109. So let's say 230 for, or 30 or 40, 130 or 40, 230 or 40.
Mhm.
So is the 2021 investment transfer figure still at about 136,000? Is that still what you anticipate, or do you anticipate it to be higher?
No, actually right now, we haven't transferred anything. And by this time, usually we would have transferred at least like probably $40,000 to assist our budget.
So you're basically living on the PPP.
Correct.
So you're going to have 240,000 in PPP in 2021, correct?
Well, no, the effect of the PPP would have been in the 2020 audit, okay, which is not shown in column G.
So you've spent the money in 2020,
Excuse me.
or
We-
just,
Well, it's not so much when we spend it, Ruth, it's more, what happens is the fact that we did receive the grant, the approval of the grant in 2021, but because it was, what they call a subsequent event that happened, in 2021, but related to 2020, therefore the auditors said, okay, well, that should be, the effect of that will be in 2020. It's just not reflected in column G because that was preliminary and not audited numbers. So everything was behind because of COVID. I mean, our auditors couldn't get to us for a month after when they were supposed to, and then they were delayed. It took longer than
We
they
finalized it, about a week ago? We got them the letter that we need. It is
Right.
very
It was
recent.
only like a week ago that we finally got the final report.
so basically then so based on this, and I hear what you're saying, it's preliminary.
Right.
So it wiped out the $19,000 deficit. So did you end the year in a black by 120,000 or something?
We did. We did.
Okay.
Yep.
So you've got that 120,000.
Right.
What happens to that? Does that just carry over, or does that go into the
Sure.
unrestricted money?
No, it just carries over. I mean,
Okay.
the unrestricted money is basically your savings account that you're, whenever we have a issue with funding, we use that unrestricted money to support our cash flow. So if we had a problem with our cash flow, then we would be drawing on that money. So that's how it basically works. Because of the fact of the PPP that we've been able to receive, And our funding from the churches through the OCWM and the RA assessment has been holding somewhat steady. We continue to be able to meet our expenses by those two main funding sources. So that's what we're trying to do. So basically, the cash flow has been strong, even though we've endured a traumatic upheaval in our whole process. So
If we can look at, since we only finalized the audit last week, if we have to amend anything, David, we can look at that.
okay, sure.
So are you saying it's going to be amended for the meeting or it's?
I don't know that today being
Well,
Thursday and that being in a couple of days, I don't know
Right.
that will be, but this is all very recent, but we can certainly have that conversation with David and myself and the auditors of how we should categorize that.
I guess I'm just putting the numbers together. So if you ended the year after audit about 120,000 in the black,
mhm.
then that should theoretically, you've just got then a $16,000 deficit for 2021. If you're bringing that 120 into 2021, then you've got 16,000, but then you've got another 109,000 for the 2021 PPP, right?
Depends if we get the forgiveness of the
Right.
2021, we don't know that yet, so it's still a loan, so I wouldn't put it in the category of,
Right.
helping our finances. And on the 2021 that was forgiven this year, that we got last year, we don't know what the impact is gonna be for the remainder of this year. I don't know that we know yet whether we're gonna be in the black, because certainly the second half of the year looks to be very different than the first half, because the staff likely will be traveling and, some things will return to normal.
So to try to point out, Ruth, that we don't carry over, like each year has to stand on its own as far as operations. So
what
I understand what you're trying to carry over the funds, but
So what happens to the 120? I guess that was my question. And you just, I thought you said it just carries over, but where's the
Right.
120 go?
well, it goes into our assets. So the idea is that the profit and loss income statement is a picture of a year of what the activity has been for the year, and whether positive or negative. And then when that year is over, it affects the net assets of the organization. So it either increases or decreases the net assets of the organization. But then you close, and then you have the next year, the next period. And so when we're looking at 2021, even though 2020 was, turned out to be a positive year, it doesn't really affect 2021 as a year because it's standalone. We're trying to make sure we have enough income to support the activity of our organization. So it needs to stand alone, even though we have those funds reserved in net assets. So our net asset picture is better after 2020 than it was even 2019, even though
Right.
2019 was a decent year because of great investments, great returns on our investments. So
Well, that's what I'm trying to get at.
yeah,
That, if you're pulling 182,000 into a 2022 budget out of it, because of a proposed deficit, but you've also gotten unexpected income, let's put it that way, from the PPP forgiveness.
mhm,
So in the end, and I understand what you're saying about the budgets being, I guess my original question was, you were talking about something like 600,000 in the unrestricted investment fund.
right.
And then you said 285 of that or something is the money for the Amistad Center.
No, that's two different funds. Two different funds. The Amistad Center is restricted to the
Oh.
Amistad Center.
Okay, so then so you've got 600,000 of unrestricted money
Right. Correct.
and you're gonna pull 182 out. I guess that my question is, where is the PPP money going into? Will it go into the unrestricted investments, or it's just sitting in a jar somewhere? Or
So Ruth, I think I understand your question, and we haven't pulled the 182 out of anywhere because we haven't needed it yet.
yeah,
So
David's
what-
got it. Okay.
So
As long as it's somewhere it's
It's
safe.
stacked up. It's stacked. up.
Probably in your desk would be better
In
than
the mattress, Ruth. It's in the mattress.
really,
that might
I wonder, is that in hundreds or thousands or
really. Pennies. Pennies from heaven.
pennies? There we go. Rolls of pennies. Well, actually, I mean, the thing is, Ruth, that PPP that you're talking about relates to 2021. 2022, we're gonna probably feel some effects of COVID because of some of the, just the changes that have happened to us and, where we live. But we won't have that funding anymore.
Right.
So that's the challenge that we're looking at, is that 182 is realizing, we're not sure if we're going to get the funding that we hope to get, that we would like to get from previous years, and that we're lowering it to 690. That's so, if everything is back to somewhat normal, I guess, we would hope to get at least $740,000 like we were projecting in 2021. Right now, we don't look like we'll get something like that in 2021.
What
Yeah,
did you
sure.
get in 2019? What was the amount for OCWM in 20 or LCBS?
LCBS, I want to say it was maybe 740, something like that. Maybe even a little more than that, because I think it was a small increase that we had for 2020 from 2019.
Okay.
So yeah, I think it was probably 740.
I guess the only thing I was trying to get at was if you're talking about taking 182,000 out of unrestricted money every year, you're going to run out of a $600,000 thing pretty quick, was what I was getting at.
yes,
You're talking, 3, 4, 5 years down the road before you get the Amistad 5%, or until you get the 5% from the capital fund campaign, you're not going to have enough left. So,
Right.
but if, that's why I'm saying, if you've got this PPP unexpected money, then that is a bigger cushion.
Mm-hmm.
And, we all know that the only place you can really pull any, when you're talking 182,000, you can pull it out of benevolence and you can pull it out of salaries, and that's it. You're not going to pull that amount of money out of the, the retreat program of NISM, so.
I mean, Ruth, you're saying the things that we've been talking about. When David came to the conference, our deficit was more like 300,000. We've done a lot to decrease it over the last nearly 10 years. COVID obviously throws a lot of things into question, but that's the reason why we have the capital campaign, right? Because we know that we don't have a sustainable situation unless we can build up, some more cushion and something to draw from. Because OCWM, or local church basic support, is nationally not going up. So local churches, associations, conferences, everybody's got to figure out other sources of income. So we're 100% aligned in terms of, the future. If we, do not have a successful campaign, and we cannot count on PPP going forward, right? This is 2 rounds. It's good fortune, but it's not going to be here in the future. So we're 100% aligned. In terms of where it goes, you know, I would anticipate that, you know, we may not need the 136 that's budgeted for 2021, but we don't know until we get further into the year. 2022 will depend a lot on whether the income that we budgeted, you know, if the 600 is not 600, is 500, it could well be 182 or more. But we just don't know how our churches are faring and our associations are faring to be able to continue to support the conference. You know, there are other things that obviously we're gonna have to look at very seriously if, you know, the income is very, very different. So I want to also be respectful of time. It's now just about 8 o'clock. You've raised some great points, Ruth. I think we need to go back and look at, you know, the 2020 now that we have the forgiveness, and that's a real thing, and account for that. The 2021, you know, we haven't had yet, it's still a loan. But I hear what you're saying, that, you know, we need to be able to account for it in the documents. That's, you know, and definitely we can try to do that. I don't know that it will be by Tuesday or Thursday of next week.
Tuesday.
Tuesday.
The good thing, Ruth, is that if you listen well to Yvette's financial report, you'll get the full picture of, on Tuesday night, you'll get the full picture of the financial report of how we actually did based on the final report.
Speaking of reports, where are they? All the reports for the meetings? Because they're the ones that are online for the New York conference are 2020, not 2021.
Ryan, I don't know if those are
Yep.
posted yet.
I
but-
can tell you, Ruth, the reports will be up online. It's I just need to get them on the website, and they will be all updated by the beginning of our plenary one. I know it's a weird surprise, but some of the reports are coming in late. So we'll get them up there, no problems, but
Yeah.
I'll make sure to blast it. So yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Right.
Thanks.
uh,
Thank you, everybody. I appreciate, that's all the questions I had. I don't know if anybody else has questions.
Well, if you can email them to David and me, I just want to be respectful of people's time. And then we can get back to you in email.
Well, thank you very much, everybody. Thanks for all the good questions, and hopefully you'll tune in on Tuesday night to our financial report and the presentation of the budget.
Thank you.
Thank you
David.
very
Thank
much.
Everybody,
God bless.
God bless.